she don't win pie. Last words echo in my mind. Listen, honey, I've got to get away.
Yeah, I guess it's because I'm black and young, and I really like this music. I decided a long time ago that I just want to play the music, and that's it. That's the most important thing, and that's what my dad always taught me: if you really like what you're doing, it will show. Robert Cray, the famous blues guitarist, has mesmerized fans for years with his soulful music and his close friendship with Eric Clapton. However, what seemed like a perfect friendship turned sour, and now that he is 71, Cray is finally telling the truth about what happened between him and Clapton. Come with us as we hear the interesting story of Robert Cray and Eric Clapton. Robert William Craig is a famous American blues guitarist and singer. He is known for his amazing guitar skills, soulful voice, and contributions to the blues genre. Craig started playing music when he was in school in Newport News, Virginia, with his first band, One Way Street. When his family moved to Tacoma, Washington, Craig continued playing music there. By the time he was 20, Sig had already seen some of his musicals at Lakes High School. After seeing famous blues artists like Albert Collins, Freddie King, and Muddy Waters perform live, he decided to form his band and start playing in college towns on the West Coast in the late 1970s. In Eugene, Oregon, he formed the Robert Cray Band and worked with Curtis Salgado on the Cray Hawks. In the 1980s, he even played a background character in the movie National Lampoon's Animal House without being credited. Starting in 1980, CR's music started to get noticed. He then released 2 albums called Bad Influence and False Accusations, which helped him build a reputation, especially in Europe. His album, Showdown, was a collaboration with his heroes Albert Collins and Johnny Copeland, but it was Strong Persuader that really made him famous. It won CR a Grammy Award and had the hit single, Smoking Gun, which made him famous all over the 1980s. CR played with big stars like Tina Turner and Keith Richards and was invited to perform with Chuck Berry in the movie, Chuck Berry Hail Hail Rock and Roll. By the late 1980s, he was selling out big venues and getting a giant following. He became known for playing Fender guitars, especially the Strater, and there are now special models for fans to buy. C's career kept going strong. He played with blues legends like John Lee Hooker and B.B. King, and he also played at the Guitar Legends concerts in Spain with acts like Albert Collins. As CRA's role in the blues world grew, he played with Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, and Stevie Ray Vaughan in what would be Vaughan's last show before his tragic death. In the 2000s, CRA continued to be recognized. In 2005, he was inducted into Hollywood's Rock Walk at Guitar Center. He also performed at the Crossroads Guitar Festival and backed Eric Clapton on his world tour. He was also inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame and given the Americana Music Lifetime Achievement Award for performance, even though he had a big falling out with Clapton. What CRA did for the blues around the world, he continues to record, perform, and inspire new generations of blues musicians. While some fans think that Cray had a good reason to break up with his friend Clapton, others think that he may have been jealous of Clapton's success. We'll let you decide if this story is true. First, let's learn more about Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton is an English rock and blues guitarist, singer, and songwriter who is known as one of the most successful and influential guitarists in rock music. In 2009, Rolling Stone ranked him second among the 100 greatest guitarists of all time, and Gibson ranked him fourth among the top 50 guitarists of all time. Time magazine also ranked him fifth among the 10 best electric guitar players. Eric Clapton fell in love with blues music as a teenager when he picked up the guitar. At first, he played in small bands, but his big break came when he joined the Yardbirds in 1963. The band was famous for their pop hits, but Clapton wanted to play pure blues music, so he left and joined John May and the Blues Breakers, where he really made a name for himself as a guitar virtuoso. Clapton's fame took off when he formed Cream with drummer Ginger Baker and bassist Jack Bruce. This power trio mixed blues with rock and long, dramatic solos. One of the biggest bands at the time, they released 4 albums but disbanded after 2 years because of internal conflicts. Not one to slow down, Clapton then formed Blind Faith with Steve Winwood. Ginger Baker and Rick Gretsch joined them. Despite the high anticipation, the band only released 1 album before disbanding. Clapton was searching for his sound by the 1970s. He played with Delaney and Bonnie before starting Derek and the Dominoes, a band that recorded Layla and other love songs. Layla became one of Clapton's most famous songs, and it was inspired by his deep, unspoken love for Pattie Boyd, who was married to his friend George Harrison at the time. However, the band's success didn't last long, and Clapton soon found himself struggling with drug addiction. In the mid-1970s, Clapton came back with a solo career that would make him a global superstar. His cover of Bob Marley's "I Shot the Sheriff" brought reggae to a bigger audience. In the 1980s, he tried pop and rock, which led to hits like "Forever Man" and "Pretending." Tragically, his 4-year-old son, Connor, fell from a high-rise window in 1991, leaving him devastated. He wrote "Tears in Heaven," a heartbreaking song that became one of his most famous works. It was on his Unplugged album, which won multiple Grammy Awards and rekindled his career in the late 1990s and beyond. Clapton went back to his blues roots and released tribute albums to blues legends. He also started the Crossroads Guitar Festival, which puts together the best guitarists in the world to raise money for addiction treatment centers. He also had big hits like "Change the World" and "My Father's Eyes," which showed he could work with different styles. He sold over 100 million songs, won 18 Grammys, and was inducted 3 times into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Even though he has had personal and professional problems, Clapton has continued to share his love of music and inspire generations of guitarists. Even now, in 2024, he is still active, releasing new music and performing all over the world to make sure that his legacy as one of rock and blues's greatest guitarists lives on. What role did Eric's childhood play in shaping the man he has become? Eric Clapton was born in a small English village called Ripley in Surrey. His mother, Patricia, was only 16 years old when she had him, and his father, Edward, was a Canadian soldier who left for war before Eric was born and never came back. He instead went to Canada and left young. Eric grew up without a father figure because his mother was so young. He was raised by his grandparents, Rose and Jack. To make things even more confusing, he thought they were his real parents and that his mother was actually his older sister. It wasn't until he was older that he found out the truth: the woman he thought was his sister was actually his mother. The revelation made him feel lost and disconnected from his family and himself. When Eric was a child, his mother moved to Germany with another Canadian soldier and got married, but Eric stayed with his grandparents in England. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy who often felt like he didn't quite fit in. But then something changed: music came into his life. On his 13th birthday, he got a guitar from Germany that would change his life. Steel made the strings extremely difficult to press. Young Eric gave up on music because he was frustrated and thought it wasn't for him, but 2 years later he picked it up again, determined to make it work. He became obsessed with blues music, a deep and emotional style that seemed to speak directly to him. He listened to records for hours, carefully figuring out how to play along. He recorded himself on a reel-to-reel tape recorder and listened back over and over until he got every note just right. He practiced for hours every day, losing himself in the sound of the blues. By the time he was 16, his talent was clear. He dropped out of school and tried to study at Kingston College of Art, but he focused on his guitar. Eventually, the school kicked him out because he was too focused on music. But Eric didn't care; he knew what he wanted. He started busking on the streets of Kingston, Richmond, and London's West End, playing for anyone who would listen. Soon, he met Dave Brock, a young musician who loved the blues as much as he did. The two of them played in pubs around Surrey, slowly building their confidence. When Eric was 17, he got his first big break when he joined the British R&B group The Roosters. One of the guitarists was Tom Guinness, who later became famous with Manfred. Clapton played with the Roosters for less than a year, and soon after, he played a few shows with Casey Jones and the Engineers. These early bands didn't make him famous, but they were the stepping stones to something much bigger. He eventually made it to the professional music world, where his amazing guitar skills made him a legend. But what is going on between Eric Clapton and Robert Cray? Robert Cray and Eric Clapton used to be close friends because they both loved music. Both were famous guitarists who played blues and rock on some of the world's biggest stages. They shared funny stories and a lot of respect for each other's skills, but over time, their friendship would be put to the test in a way that neither of them had expected. Clapton wrote a song about the pandemic, and in the lyrics, he compared the restrictions people faced during it to slavery. This shocked Sig because he grew up in Georgia, a place where black people had fought long and hard for their rights. He knew about the suffering, injustice, and the struggle that continued even after slavery ended. Comparing a temporary lockdown to centuries of forced labor and cruelty was deeply offensive. Not sure what to think, Kay decided to email Clapton to find out why he had written those lyrics. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Clapton may not have known how hurtful what he said was, but when he answered, it made CR feel even worse. Clapton said he was talking about slaves from Old England, not American slavery. While this was an attempt to explain why the comparison was so wrong, it felt like it was more of an excuse. Cray tried to ignore it, but something had changed. Then he saw a new picture that made it even clearer. Clapton standing next to Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Abbott had just signed some of the strictest abortion laws in the country and supported voting restrictions that made it harder for many people, especially minorities, to vote. When Carson looked at that picture, he remembered another picture from years earlier. Kay was seated next to Clapton in that photo, along with guitarist Jimmy Vaughn and blues icon B.B. King. It was a moment of unity, a celebration of music and friendship. But now that he saw Clapton with a politician whose views Carson strongly disagreed with, he felt very let down. He asked himself, who is Eric now, and how did we end up here? Cray knew he couldn't ignore how he felt. He had built his life and career on being honest, standing up for what he thought was right, and admiring Clapton. But he couldn't stand by someone whose views had become extreme and selfish in his eyes, so he made a decision. He walked away from their friendship. Instead of dwelling on the past, Cray focused on what was most important to him, his music, his principles, and the people who shared his vision of respect and understanding. Truthfulness had always been central to the blues, and Cray understood that certain friendships falter when values diverge too much. But how did they meet, and when did they meet? The musical paths of Eric Clapton and Robert C. crossed in the mid-1980s, but they didn't officially collaborate until 1986, when C. joined Clapton on the album August. Joined Clapton on August's album. Their relationship really took shape at the Prince's Trust Rock Gala in London, where they played together on stage. At the time, Say was becoming famous for his modern yet deeply rooted blues sound, which was shown on his breakthrough album Strong. By the late 1980s, Clapton found himself drawn to C's expressive guitar playing and smooth vocals. His hit song, Smoking Gun, caught Clapton's attention. Here was a young bluesman who had managed to bridge the gap between traditional and contemporary blues with a fresh, soulful edge. C was invited to open for Clapton on his Journeyman tour, where they shared the stage night after night and often jammed together with Craig's crisp guitar playing. Their chemistry led to more collaborations, and in 1990, Cray played a key role on Journeyman, adding backing vocals and guitar work. Their friendship grew stronger as they shared respect and admiration, but one of the most moving times was when Cray was part of the all-star lineup at the 24-night concerts at London's Royal Albert Hall, standing shoulder to shoulder with Clapton, Buddy Guy, and others, reaffirming his place as blues royalty. Sadly, their connection also led to Clapton's death. On August 26, 1990, Cray was in Wisconsin with Clapton, setting up to perform at the Alpine Valley Music Theater with Stevie Ray Vaughan. After the show, Cray chose to drive to his next destination, while Clapton and Vaughan took separate helicopters. V's chopper crashed, killing him and everyone else on board. The loss hurt Clapton and Cray a lot, and it made their bond stronger as blues musicians who had seen how fragile life is. Over the years, Cray and Clapton have kept performing together, and their songs have helped connect blues musicians of different generations. What went wrong in this relationship, and when did it really go bad? Robert C. and Eric Clapton's relationship ended in 2021 because of Clapton's controversial views on the pandemic. C., who had admired and worked with Clapton for a long time, was deeply upset by some of Clapton's actions and words, especially his song, "This Has Got to Stop," which C saw as supporting anti-vaccine and anti-lockdown views. Their fight got worse when Cr., who is black, read an interview in which Clapton talked about his racist comments from the 1970s but didn't fully acknowledge their effect. K sent an email to Clapton asking about it, but Clapton's response made him feel disrespected and alone, so he cut ties and refused to go on their planned tour together. While Clapton has played down the rift in public, Cr has been vocal about his disappointment, saying he could no longer support Clapton's views or be associated with him. Their strong musical partnership seems to be broken for good, but their legacy lives on. Up one day as one of the greatest guitarists of all time, his sound, his style, and even his passion for music were shaped by the legends who came before him. These musicians weren't just names to him, they were teachers, heroes, and in some cases like family. One of Clapton's biggest influences was Muddy Waters, the great bluesman from Mississippi. When Clapton first heard Watts' deep raw voice and powerful guitar, he felt something awaken inside him. It was more than just music, it was a language of pain, joy and survival. Later in life, when Clapton actually got to meet Waters, he described him as the father figure he never really had. They became close, but during this time Clapton was struggling with heavy drinking. Sadly, Waters passed away in 1983, but his influence on Clapton's playing in soul never faded. Then there were the three kings of the blues, B.B. King, Albert King, and Freddie King. These men each had their own style, from B.B.'s smooth and expressive bends to Albert's sharp and aggressive notes to Freddie's fiery attack on the strings. Clapton learned from all of them and combined their styles into his own. He even worked directly with B.B. King, making an album called Riding with the King with him in 2000 and appearing in the music video for the song. Clapton drives B.B. King around as a sign of his deep respect for the singer, but if there was one musician who really shaped Clapton's heart and soul, it was Robert Johnson. Johnson was a mysterious blues musician from the 1930s who recorded only a few songs before he died young, but his music was full of dark, haunting feelings. Clapton wrote that Johnson's voice and guitar seemed to echo something inside him that he had always felt but never knew how to say. In 2008, Clapton honored Johnson by recording an album of his songs. Even after decades of playing the blues, Clapton still thought Johnson's music was the most powerful. Clapton wasn't just influenced by the blues. As a teenager, he was also influenced by Buddy Holly, an early rock and roll pioneer. The first album he ever bought was The Chirping Crickets by Holly's band. He still remembers the moment he saw Holly on TV holding a Fender guitar and thought, "I thought I had died and gone to heaven." Clapton said that seeing Holly play that sleek, futuristic guitar made him sure that this was his future. In the documentary, some of Clapton's inspirations came as a surprise. In Eric Clapton's song, 12 Bars, he said that he wanted his guitar to sound like Bismillah Khan's reed instrument, the Shehnai. Khan was an Indian artist who played this traditional wind instrument. Clapton didn't just copy other guitarists when he thought about sound. He was trying to get feelings from instruments in styles other than rock and blues. Little Walter had an interesting effect as well. Little Walter was a blues harmonica player. Walter's harmonica playing through an amplifier blew Clapton away. The sound was rich, full, and powerful. It wasn't just the notes, it was the feeling behind them. Because Clapton took parts of the sounds, emotions, and techniques of these musicians, from bluesmen to rock pioneers to Indian classical players, and mixed them together to make his own sound. When you hear Clapton play, you're not just hearing one man, you're hearing the echoes of all the legends who came before him. Eric Clapton's name is written in the history of music like a legend. He is not just another guitarist, he is one of the best to ever play. From the moment he picked up a guitar as a teenager, he changed the way people thought about music. His playing, his sound, and even his attitude toward the guitar changed rock and blues forever. As a solo artist, with the Yardbirds, and with Cream, Clapton is the only musician to have been inducted 3 times into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That alone shows how important he was. When people talk about guitar heroes, his name always comes up. In fact, fans were so impressed with his skill that they started writing "Clapton as God" on walls around London in the 1960s. His fiery blues solos and emotional playing made him more than just a musician, he was a symbol of what a guitarist could be. But Clapton's influence wasn't just about his skill, he also changed the way music was recorded in the early days of sound. Engineers placed microphones just a few inches from a guitar amplifier. Clapton didn't like this. He wanted recordings to sound more like they did in a live concert where the music fills the air, so he moved the microphones farther away, creating a bigger, more atmospheric sound. Other musicians including Roger Waters of Pink Floyd noticed this and said it changed everything. Before Clapton, guitar playing in England was simple. After Clapton it became powerful, raw and full of feeling. His status as a British culture icon was officially recognized when artist Sir Peter Blake included Clapton in a modern version of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover, and he became one of the first musicians to be honored with a star on the Walk of Fame at the Royal Albert Hall, a venue he had played more than any other in his career. This put him alongside legends like Muhammad Ali, Winston Churchill and Albert Einstein, figures who shaped history in their own way. However, not everyone sees Clapton as a perfect hero. Some critics say that even though he is a great guitarist, his songs aren't always good and his albums don't always live up to his ability. Robert Christo, a well-known music journalist, once wrote that Clapton had guitar hero's disease, an artist who was great at playing but sometimes lacked depth in his music. Others have criticized his personal views and actions, including controversial comments he made in the 70s. This has led to mixed feelings about his legacy, especially among younger musicians. His influence is so deep that he is even mentioned in other artists' songs. In Moon Song, singer Phoebe Bridgers originally wrote the lyric, "We hate Eric Clapton," though she later changed it to "We hate Tears in Heaven," referring to his heartbreaking song about the loss of his son. Other musicians like M.J. Lenderman referenced the famous idea that Clapton was once considered a near-mythical figure in rock. Despite the controversy, there is no denying that Eric Clapton changed music forever. His guitar playing inspired generations. His innovations in recording shaped the way albums sound, and his presence in rock history is impossible to erase. Whether loved, criticized or debated, Clapton's name will always be one of the most important in music history. If you liked the video, please like, follow, and click the next video that comes up on your screen.